Thank you for joining us for another episode of the PayDestiny podcast. If you have career goals that include getting a promotion, getting a pay raise, and making the most out of every job offer, then you'll love today's guest, who is the co-founder and CEO of one of California's leading coding boot camps. I'm Adriana Herrera, the founder of the PayDestiny podcast and PayDestiny, a new software for women and underrepresented professionals to build skills and confidence to get a promotion, get a pay raise, and reach career goals. Let me tell you more about today's guest, Liliana Monge. Liliana is the co-founder and CEO of Sabio, a multi-million-dollar profitable coding bootcamp. Sabio empowers people with the infrastructure and support needed to successfully change careers, develop in-demand technology skills, and get hired at top companies like Google, Amazon, Tesla, Microsoft, amongst many others. Sabio was founded in 2012 was inspired by the desire to increase the representation of Latinos and people from underserved communities into the tech industry that was emerging in Los Angeles at that time. What started as a desire to help empower her community has turned into a compliant and fast-growing training curriculum to successfully grow a career as a software engineer. Prior to co-founding Sabio, Liliana worked in real estate, preparing project feasibility and pro forma analysis for dozens of publicly owned properties. She has a bachelor's of arts in biology from Wellesley College. Please help me welcome Liliana Monge to the PayDestiny podcast. Welcome, Liliana. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Well, we are excited to have you. Over the next 60 minutes, we're going to go through your professional experiences, learn about your promotions and pay raises, possible salary negotiations, and then also your do's and don'ts. For context for the audience today, will you be providing us information from an employee perspective, an employer perspective, or perhaps both?
I would say it's 60-40. We have been employers now for the past 8 years. And so, I sign the front of checks. I'm the person who makes sure that, we run payroll and we compensate employees and contractors, which is also a very important part of the conversation, I believe. And so definitely I have a lot of perspective as it pertains to how to make sure you're an awesome employee. But then also, obviously, I had 12 years of professional experience in the workforce when I was signing the back of the check of my payroll checks, and I was an employee as well. So happy to discuss both angles of the situation.
Perfect. All right. So that's great. So 60 employer, 40 employee, is that correct?
In terms of my professional right, most of my insights, the majority of my insights are about what it means to be an employer. But I was once upon a time an employee as well. So I still have those insights as well to share.
Love it. All right. So just diving right in, tell us about your very first job ever. What was it and what did you do and how much did you get paid?
So when I was 13 in the summer, one Saturday, my sister said, get dressed, you're coming to work with me.
Oh,
And so I was my sister's assistant at Super Video in Southgate. And my job was to back her up. She was super busy staffing the cashier's register, helping people check out videos. I don't know if you remembered back then, but this was, I think, in 1990. On the weekends, people would go and rent a couple of videos, and it was super busy. So my job was to help her and to support her, so that we could keep the business running efficiently. And I believe I was probably paid like $5.25 per hour, and I would work probably 12-hour shifts. We would start in the morning, open, clean, and we would not leave there probably until like 11 or midnight.
oh my gosh, those are really long days. Now, by any chance, at the age of 13, did you negotiate that $5.25 hourly wage?
I did not. I didn't even negotiate whether I could go to work. She was like, she's 4 years older than I am. She's super
Levántate,
smart.
let's go.
Yeah, she was like, "Get up, it's Saturday. I'm exhausted. I need help and you're coming with me." I didn't even know if I was gonna be paid. I was just like, "Let's go." And obviously after working a full day, the owner took out money from the cash register and paid me for my day's work.
That's awesome. And then what was your first professional job post preteen teen years?
So my professional job was at Telscape. It was actually a tech startup
Oh,
in the summer of 1999. I had graduated from Wellesley College a month prior to that, and I got the job. And of course, in Latina fashion, my first day of work as a professional in a tech startup lasted for 3 days. My
oh,
first day was on a Wednesday. They said, come and make sure that you bring luggage because we're not coming back until Friday evening. So we had a full day at work in Monrovia on Wednesday. And then Wednesday evening, we all drove to LAX. And then we had a conference all day Thursday, all day Friday. So I didn't come home until Friday, probably at 9 p.m. So literally, my first day of professional work was 3 days nonstop.
wow. And then you left the position after that? Or
No, that was just like my first day of work was 3 days.
oh, I misunderstood. I was like, oh, it must have been a bad first day of work. But I see.
No?
So it's your first day of work was literally 3 days long.
Yes,
And then
exactly.
for that position, when you were offered and in discussions with the hiring manager, did you negotiate that salary at all?
I didn't negotiate the first salary. I didn't really know. So I graduated in 1999. There wasn't a lot of online resources just yet. There are probably a couple websites, but they're probably still very nascent. And so I just discussed the salary and the compensation package that I received with my immediate family. And they kind of gave me an idea that for the Los Angeles local marketplace, the salary was pretty competitive. And everybody was pretty happy and proud that I was able to get that kind of a salary, being a 22-year-old. So I did communicate with others. I did share what the offer looked like, which I think is something that's important. People really need to stop all of this shyness. And I know it has implications because some people are like, well, if people know I have money, they're going to ask me for things. Um, which you just have to learn to say yes or no. It's not a big deal. But I think by us keeping all of this, like trying to be secret about what we're making, you're just really hurting yourself and you're hurting your community. So you should have a couple of people that you can trust that you can discuss offers. I mean, now it's a different world. This was literally 21 years ago. So, whoever's listening to this now, there's just tons of research out there that will allow you to know what the compensation components are, which is another interesting aspect. It's not just what is your salary, um, what equity are you receiving, what annual cash bonus are you receiving, what equity bonus are you receiving. So it's really important to think about compensation in a very comprehensive way.
That's interesting with that you didn't necessarily negotiate your job offer, but you did what is like a gut check.
Right.
And I imagine so you went to your family, you went to your parents, I imagine, brothers,
No, so
sisters.
so I spoke with my sister about the offer, and then I also spoke with her husband, who was actually an employer in the Los Angeles area, and so he was like a district manager, so he knew what people got paid for different positions,
Got
and
it.
so he's like, "Yeah, that's a great salary. You're good to go."
That's a lot more than people do at that age. I didn't even do that. I was really grossly underpaid in my first job by like $30,000, $40,000. So I should have done that at that time. But thinking about that first job that you had at a tech startup, and where you are now as an employer, what was the first moment that you had that was intentional of saying like I really want to grow my career and I'm going to set a goal and I'm going to go after it, whether that was a position, a promotion, a pay raise, like where was that first moment for you?
So I think that being in that at that first position, because it was a startup, there was a lot of opportunity, and it was very clear that if you worked hard, as the company grew, you could take on different roles that would come on with additional responsibilities. And so that was definitely the culture of that first company. And so that's something that people definitely need to think about as they're going to grow, join a group. What's the ethos of that organization? Do they like to cultivate talent from within, or are they very much like, we only hire people who have the exact skill set and we'll bring them from the outside? So by me working at the tech startup, it was growing very rapidly. Departments were constantly springing up, and new heads of department were needed. I really was very fortunate to kind of land in that kind of a situation. And because it was a startup and it was growing, um, I didn't have to necessarily think about like, I want to grow my career. It was like, there's so much to do. And if you're willing to take on and drink from the fire hose, they're more than happy to give you additional responsibilities. And that kind of matched my personality type anyway. So it worked out very well.
It sounds like you landed in a really great spot, like your first job out of college, where you didn't really have to negotiate this job offer too much, and you automatically, just inherently through the culture of the company, had opportunities for growth. So you weren't, 1, 2, even maybe 3 years in and being like, man, I need to start thinking about my next steps. It was just something that was inherent to the company culture. When you were applying for that position, was that something that you were thinking about intentionally, or was that something that just seemed to happen? And if you were thinking about intentionally, how did you assess for that type of culture?
Yeah, I think I wasn't intentional about it at all. I think it was just a matter of being lucky to find a startup that was growing, that had just been funded. Like literally, I think I was like their fifth hire.
Oh, wow.
And I think when they hired me, um, they may have just secured like their seed funding of a couple $1 million, or it happened the week after I was hired or something like that. So for me, I was just really lucky to end up in a position like that. But if I would have ended up in a corporate like position, I think a lot of corporate organizations have structured programs that they call them like management leadership programs. There's a bunch of phrases that are kind of code for, we will develop top talent and give you rotations. So if anyone's listening and really wants to be very intentional, which I necessarily was not, um, you can look for, either a startup. Some people say it's a great place to learn a lot because there's so much opportunity. Or if you want something that's very structured, you can go to, Wells Fargo, any large Fortune 500 company, and they have rotational programs that allow you to learn about different parts of the business. And then that really puts you in a perfect position for leadership.
That's great advice. There's really no reason that now, especially with so much access to information, that professionals at any stage of their career should not be thinking about those next steps and the looking for those resources that are available to them, both online and within different companies that they might be working for and applying for. Thinking about, and just a note on that too, I think it's not just um, the responsibility of the employer to grow the employee, but the employee and ourselves to take responsibility and set that out for ourselves and go after that as well. I hear sometimes, well, like there's no opportunities for me. And my mantra has always been, well, if there's no opportunity for me, I'm going to make it for myself, because I can't wait for someone to be doing it for me, because I'm not anyone else's priority in the way that I am my own priority. So I just wanted to know on that, just to piggyback off what you just said. Looking at your career, how many pay raises have you gotten over the course of your career? And I know it's kind of hard to think back, maybe all the way even to 13, but more or less, how many have you gotten, and how many did you have to advocate for, and how many were just given to you based on merit?
Um, so I received, I probably got 5 raises over
Mhm.
the course of the time that I worked as an employee. And um, the first significant one, I did not have to advocate for. It was a function of additional responsibility that I took on that came with kind of like a new title, new compensation. And then after that, additional raises came from different companies, different positions. So, you know, the professional background that I have is a little old and antiquated because I didn't, I stopped being an employee roughly 8 years ago. And so now there's just so much transparency, Indeed, Glassdoor, built in LA. I mean, wherever it is that you're, whatever industry you're in, there's so many websites that help you really understand what you should be compensated and the components of the compensation that come. So you can think of my professional life as an employee as kind of the digital dark ages, where now it's 2021. There is just a plethora of opportunities for you to know exactly what you should be compensated by making sure that you do your research online, different forums, Reddit, Quora, Glassdoor, all of it.
With when you got your pay raises as an employee, were you just like excited to get the pay raise, or did you maybe stop and think and be like, "Hey, was I underpaid and now I'm getting this pay raise to get to market level or closer to market level, or is this even on par with what other people are making, or is it just like, yes, I got a raise, I'm making more money"? Were those thoughts or questions anything that maybe you thought of at that time?
I definitely wondered if I was being compensated properly for what I was doing, the types of the work that I was doing. Um, I was kind of younger in the organizations, like my age wise. So I think it's always hard for everyone to feel like 1,000% comfortable with what you're making.
Mhm.
Um, and depending on the company culture, you may or may not feel comfortable discussing what your compensation is with other people. Um, so I think there's always been a level of ambivalence around being paid what you're worth. So I don't think that I've always felt like, yes, I'm like in the perfect situation and I'm getting paid what I deserve. And I think that's one of the reasons why I became an entrepreneur, because there it's like, you eat what you kill, right? Like whatever it is that you generate and however you run your business, then that's what you're able to pay yourself. And so for my personality type, people have different personality types and they really have to be comfortable in those different situations. Um, so for me, the best way for me to find comfort around how I'm compensated is for me to just generate my own income and not depend on a paycheck.
That resonates with me a lot. Thinking about your experiences now as an employer with pay raises, because I know that that's been the last 8 years or so for you. Tell me about how you think about, let's just start first with negotiating job offers and what your experience has been like there, the good, the bad, the ugly. And then let's jump over to the pay raises and how you think about that as well.
Yeah, so I think once you have an organization, you just have to have a good understanding of what the market is, because when you're an employer, you're kind of shopping, right? And so it doesn't really, quote unquote, matter what I'm comfortable paying or what I want to pay someone. I Sabio's competing with other companies for that talent. So we have to be very diligent in doing our research and understand what is the market for this position. And that's one component. And then for the person who's going to come in this position, um, what where in that band do they fall in? So it's kind of like a two-pronged approach.
Mhm.
And whether it's hiring someone for a position or when you're hiring a contractor, right? Like I've hired different types of attorneys, and some of them I think have charged up to $1,000 an hour versus others will charge you 250 an hour. So it just gives you a very clear idea that depending on the expertise of a person, there's a range for that expertise, and you just have to try to figure out where there's a match for your organization and your budget.
So when you're hiring someone, you guys are doing your research, you're looking at what the market's paying, you're also thinking about being moderately competitive with the other companies that are trying to attract the same talent. And then it just sounds like you're having a conversation with the person to try and understand what they've done and why they are worth a certain value. So when someone is asking for, let's just, hypothetically pick, you guys are paying $85,000 and that's what you've budgeted for a position. And someone says, well, I want 95,000. And you're, well, okay, that could be in the range, perhaps. What would someone need to say to you as an employer that would convince you that they are worth that additional $10,000? And that's just completely under the assumption that you had the budget, because sometimes you just don't have a budget and you're like, sorry, this is it. Would love to have you, but can't have you. So someone coming to you, you're interested, but what would they need to say? What are the words that you would need to hear from them?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things that, if you're an employee, you really kind of forget is that the person on the other side of the table um, really needs to feel like you care about the company. And so it's kind of like a little backwards because we have a lot of discussion about the person, their expertise, and then you decide, okay, I want this person, and then you talk about the money. And so when you're going through and you're having the interviews, the person's enthusiasm about the position and about your company and their perspective on joining the team is laid out early.
Mhm.
And then when you're having the conversation about compensation, you're always looking back at those earlier conversations. So if I've interviewed someone and they didn't show that enthusiasm for the company and they kind of want to get paid at the higher end of the band, I may go out to market to try to find someone that maybe I'll pay them that extra 10, but they will have that enthusiasm for the organization and the mission.
So
So,
what does that actually like express like how does that come across in words? So because every person I interview is, oh, your company looks so cool, I found them online, like you guys got a great blah blah. And that's just kind of standard for a general interview. I know I have certain things that I look for, which I can share, but I would love to say like what's that sound bite that you would hear from someone and be like, they are authentic, they are really enthusiastic, they know about Sabio, they know about this position. Like, what's that sound bite to you?
yeah, I think the soundbite has come across over a couple of interviews that you've had, right? You usually have one or two, maybe three interviews. And so having them relay back saying, like, hey, Lily, I heard you when we had our first interview and you talked about the fact that Sabio is 100% dedicated to helping people break into tech. And I am 100% committed to that mission, right? So, whatever it is that that company does, right, for us, it's developing technical talent. It's helping people get the skills that will help them thrive in this innovation economy. So, when someone can bring that up early or through the course of the number of interviews and say, I read about this success story on your blog and I see that, Nikki is now working at Amazon. That's amazing. I want to be part of something like that. Right. So, and it's so hard because when you're an employee, you feel like like everything is about you, and it is, but it's about, are you a fit within the new organization you're trying to join? So there's like a really fine line that you have to work between like really doing an interview, understanding that organization, and really making it clear how you're going to add value because you care and because you're passionate. And so people really do need to do a lot of research when they're going to go ahead and interview for a company so that all of that can come across.
I am definitely the phrase add value. That's something that I'm always looking for when I'm interviewing, because everyone can say things, but it's add value for me. And then how are they currently adding value, even though they're not with my company, but adding value to the ecosystem? So do they have a blog? Are they tweeting about the things that they say that they're passionate about? Are they participating in groups that are talking about the latest technologies? Are they learning on their own? And how are they expressing those things that they're doing in the context of the position that they are applying for? So it's the value plus the authentic passion by showing that they're doing it regardless. Like they're not waiting to get hired and then they're going to do. It's they're expressing like, I am really passionate about it and I'm doing this and I'm doing this and let me point you to here. And this is how this relates to this. And this is how, like, that's what I look for. Cause I'm like, that's passion. I've even hired people who are less experienced because they are doers and they are passionate through their doing, rather than people who were more experienced who were just like, hey, let me come in, I'm worth this much and then I'll do. So for me, that's something that I definitely look for. And I'll take a risk on people who don't necessarily have the experience. And I've never regretted it. They have also always been some of like the top performing, growing members of my team. So that's something that I look for. When you are looking at now, how many people do you have on your team?
I believe there's 13 of us right now.
13. Okay. I love that's such a great size. Very like close, but still starting to reach that start more growth, which I know that you guys are having. So when you're thinking about pay raises and promotions, like that's a very different thing than just negotiating the initial salary. So let's talk very specifically about how you think about pay raises, whether it's the mid-year reviews, annual reviews, merit raises, like whatever you have done to date, and then also maybe things that you're thinking about potentially incorporating and doing as you guys are scaling up, because I know that you guys are in a period of growth.
Yeah, so I mean, we think of compensation in, four components. What are all the benefits that you receive? So, health insurance, all that stuff's very important. So that's a part of compensation. We do annual compensation, increases. So usually around December, we'll see, okay, how did the year look? What do the books look like? And then do an adjustment for the first payroll of January. So it's salaries. And then it's also some cash bonus or equity. And so we'll have a conversation with our team members and we'll say, hey, are you interested in a blend? Maybe you want some equity, maybe you want some cash, or do you want it to be all equity or do you want it to be all cash? Because everybody values things differently, right? And so, some years someone may say like, yes, I'm interested in equity. Other years I may say, I'm not. I'm trying to buy a new house. I prefer to just do a cash bonus. So I think it's important to have that conversation with your team members if you can. That's how we've approached it, so that we give people what they value and what's important. Obviously, we value our equity very much,
Yeah.
and so it really depends on the position, the team member, how long they've been with us, and then also time off, how many vacation days, sick days, all of that stuff, in our opinion, is another component of compensation. So it's kind of like the whole package is evaluated, within, usually in December time period to set the new budget for the next year.
And that's important to note too, is that when we are thinking about pay raises, and I'll put the we, and I'm going to put myself in an employee seat right now by saying that we, it's important to think about the full picture, because there is desired salary, which is just your base salary, and then there is desired compensation, which includes all of those other things that you're talking about, which is your salary, it's your job perks, it's your health benefits, it's your time off, it's a plethora of different things. So it's important to think about that also in the conversations with employers during pay raise time, because maybe there isn't time, or I'm sorry, there isn't budget to perhaps give an additional X%, but maybe you can get a smaller percent and additional time off. So there's always different things there that can be negotiated within the pay raise conversations. And it sounds like you guys have those annually. Is that correct? And so you're having annual equity conversations, and then people can add more equity annually, or how does that work for you guys?
Yeah. So if people are going to receive equity in the company, it either will be part of their initial offer,
Hmm.
um, or it could be at the end of the year as we think about what their compensation is going to look like for the next year. So it can kind of be at either either place.
Got it. Now thinking about those annual conversations, during those conversations, are you guys also assessing for promotions, or is it just like we're looking at the how you've done and now we're looking at your compensation just based on the current position? Like, what is it for you that you're looking for in order to promote someone and bump someone up within your organization? And when do you guys have those conversations?
Yeah, the conversations do tend to happen towards the end of the year because we want to try to set a budget for the new year.
Mhm.
And so we kind of have an idea of what the year look like, what the books look like, and then what we can afford going forward. So that's like from our side. And then we look at how the team member has contributed to the team, how they've grown, what they've demonstrated they're interested in contributing. Every person is different. And I think this is something that's important for people. Like some people are like the absolute best employee where they're like, look, I'm going to be here at 9 a.m. sharp every single day. And I'm going to take my 55 minutes of lunch and I'm going to clock out at 6 p.m. And that's it. That's all you can expect from me. Right. And I'm very consistent. And like that is who I am. Versus, maybe there are other people who, are not like that crazy punctual, but they'll put in some extra hours on a Saturday. Or someone that'll be like, hey, I've been really thinking about this problem that we're having, and I think we can solve it in this way. And I'm gonna go out of my way to try to give you a mock-up of what that would look like so we can all consider it. So I think different team members are going to contribute different things. And then they also are going to value their compensation differently. So some people will be like, look, I need 4 weeks of paid vacation. I don't care about equity. I don't care about cash bonus. I just need to know that, I can take off a week at the end of every quarter and my paycheck is always going to be taken care of. So I think it's always a match where it's like people need to think about what they value, what's important to them, and then communicate that with their employer, right? Because we've offered equity to certain team members, and they're like, "Thanks, nope, I want cash."
Mm.
Right, and that's their thing. Versus other people who are like, "I don't really want an annual bonus. I just want it as equity." And so, I think people just kind of need to be, if you can and you have that flexibility. It depends on what lens you want to look at it from. Um, I would recommend that people definitely consider salary is very important. You want to get yourself a market rate salary, but you should be optimizing for equity, ownership. And I think that's something that's really missing in the conversation, especially when you think about the Latino community. We don't think about ownership. We think about like I have my salary and I have my 2 weeks vacation and I'm set. And I'm like, well, that's just taken care of today. But if you actually join a company that will give you equity, if there's a liquidity event, that can mean a down payment on a house. That could mean all sorts of things. And so we really need to think about entire compensation packages, not just your salary, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And it's I think part of the thing with equity too is that equity comes depending on the type of company that you are working for. Large publicly traded companies may or may not offer them. Small businesses may or may not offer them. Tech industry is definitely something that is commonplace to offer. And then it's also understanding that structure, right? I had a conversation with someone maybe about 3 to 4 weeks ago, where they were promised equity as part of like the first 6 hires. The equity hadn't been assigned, it had been almost a year, and it just sounded like things were in disarray. They were starting to have like a disconnect with the leadership team because they were feeling untrustworthy of what is this theoretical equity. So there was a conversation around here's the general structure of equity. Equity generally is assigned as part of your compensation package. You get X%. Typically vesting over 4 years. There is traditionally a sort of cliff. A cliff means that you don't invest for a certain amount of time. That's kind of like the probationary period to make sure that you're just not going to randomly walk away with a ton of equity. That's about a year. That can be negotiated in some cases. And it's something that I encourage people to negotiate if they're going to be taking less salary in lieu of equity. Sometimes I'm like, well, instead of a 12-month cliff, go for 8 or go for 6, something of that nature. But I think it's a lot of the times it is not understood. And there also has to be the thought process of, do I really think this is going to be worth something? And that I think is also, it's hard to figure out, right? There's that story about the muralist at Facebook who made the Facebook mural in the early days, and they gave him like 0.00 whatever percent of equity, and he did the mural for free. And he became a millionaire when when Facebook produced a bunch of millionaires by making a free mural. And I'm sure he was just happy to have his mural up there, but never did he think that would be worth $1 million or more. So I think that there's also when people are having those discussions, if they're not comfortable having them because they don't know, there's nothing wrong with asking. I love when people ask me, like, I don't really know what that means. Can you explain it to me? And I'll be like, yes, well, we have restricted stock options and common stock options, and this is how things work. And I would say that if you have an employer who's not willing to take that time to break that down, to me, that's a flag, because there needs to be a mutual exchange of value. And part of that is making sure that your team members understand how that compensation breaks down, whether it is health insurance, dental benefits, meditation benefits, like what, having a gym person come in, whatever it is. So I think it's really important to ask those questions and not be afraid to ask them. When you've really given us some insights on the compensation, the way that you think about compensation, the way you think about pay, but what about promotions? So when someone comes in, and maybe you haven't really had too many promotions just as of yet, but maybe there has been. But when you're thinking about someone growing with your company, or perhaps your own experiences getting promotions, what are some of the things that you have done to get a promotion? And then also some of the things that you're looking for within your team members to be like, you know what, they're ready to grow and move up with our company.
Yeah, I think promotions are a function of going above and beyond and really just showing that you have a great sense of ownership. That, when you're when you're assigned something, you really kind of just absolutely grab a hold of it and are accountable for it. And so, those characteristics are clear. And as they're like a new opportunity comes up, then you know, hey, well, this person is always kind of really on top of things. They're going above and beyond. They really care. They really show like they care about this stuff and it's important to them as well. And so therefore, let's put them in a position of additional responsibility. And so I think that's pretty clear versus, people who are like, hey, I have my lane, I have my job functions, I'm great at that, I'm happy with that, and like that's all that I have for you, because I have a whole other life that um I need bandwidth for, and that's perfectly fine as well. So I think it's just from the employer standpoint, it's really just looking at people who are willing to kind of go above and beyond, versus folks that make it very clear, like, hey, Lily, you got me here for 40 hours and that's it. That's all you got from me. Thank you.
Mhm.
Bye. Because I have a whole bunch of other things that I care about, that I'm passionate about, and that are important to me. And that's great too.
I think it's always hard because people have different responsibilities in life and are at different stages. So
Yes.
if you're a younger professional, traditionally you don't have family, you don't have as many responsibilities outside of the work environment. As you know, you get a little bit older, you start to have children and families, or there's just different things that happen. The way that I like to look at it is slightly different. I like to look at it in the sense of like productivity, because accommodating different team members, whether they are just there 40 hours because they have other things going on, or someone who's there, longer or working on the weekends and stuff. For me, I like to think about, well, one, we all have different ways of how we work and the times we work best. Also different constraints and whatnot. But then what is someone producing within that amount of time? I would rather have someone who slays it in like 4 hours a day than is there for a full 8 hours a day. And that's the way I like to think about things. But I know that it's like it's an entire spectrum for different businesses and different cultures and whatnot. But at the same time, if you're just like, hey, I'm just going to be there for like 4 hours and then peace out, then I'm going to be like, hey, like, where are you the rest of the time at the same time? So, but I like to really think about it in regards to like productivity and what's being produced, outcomes based, basically. Um, thinking
Yeah. I mean, that's really important. But when this is where, like, the type of company that you're in matters, because um in a company like Sabio that is growing, there's always stuff to do.
yep,
So if you can get something done in 4 hours, great. I have other things that I
right.
need done in the other 4 hours, right? So people kind of have like their rhythm and whatnot, and you kind of figure that out with each team member. So productivity is, yeah, it's definitely, it's your throughput, right?
Yep.
In a given time, whatever that is, how productive are you?
Yeah, totally agree. And that's why I was like, if you're just there for 4 hours and you're like, bye, see you later. I'm like, oh, we have other things that need to get done. So how about not bye? But if they are getting done within 4 hours, then you're like, you know what, they're probably ready for the next step because they're taking on more work. Thinking about your background being Latina. And so for the audience, so they get to know you a little bit better. If you can share a little bit about like what's your background like, and when I say that is ethnicity wise, and how do you think that has contributed to your success as a professional, or perhaps hindered in any way?
Yeah, so I'm a his no, what is it called? Cis heterosexual woman. I was born in northern Mexico. I'm married to a man who's Colombian. So I have a lot of deep Latino roots in me. And I think that, I was raised with values of, utility, right? Making sure that you're always working hard, that you're always grinding. It doesn't matter what it is that you're doing, right? Like, my God, like, so my sister being my first boss, it wasn't her store, but she had ownership in her mind. She didn't care that she was there 9 to 5 as a 19-year-old herself. She was like, look, we're here, we have to do stuff, right? And so I think that that's just been my family culture. um and so I don't, I'm sure there's people from around the entire globe who have the same ethos. um One thing that is particular to being Latino in my community where I grew up in Mexico, um there's still a number of native Mexicanos, the indigenous people, the original people from Cuauhtemoc, and they have this concept called corima, which means kindness. So it's a lot of barter system. And so I saw my grandmother be very kind and be very generous in spite of her having very, very modest resources. And so it was like if someone came to her door and asked for something and she had something to spare, she was going to be generous. And so I saw her do that every day of my youth. And so that's something that I tried to continue to practice. Um, and that's an important part of who I am as well.
It goes with what you have on your shirt, rise and grind.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very much so. It's so much that it's like, it's right there.
No, cállate. Make salsa, rice grind, and make something delicious.
Seriously. And you said you're from northern Mexico. So I think your family's from Chihuahua, where I have
Yeah.
family in Chihuahua too.
Yep. I'm from
Yeah, we
Chihuahua.
have little
Cuauhtemoc.
town, San Augustine, right across the border. So
Yeah, close to Juarez. Very cool.
yep, Juarez. The dad's from Juarez. My mom's mom is from San Agustin, all Chihuahua, then El Paso. So it's a little neighborhood over there, but the values extend all throughout, Mexico, Central America, South America. I loved what you said about the idea of kindness, and extending that, and how you got that from your grandmother. I think in some ways, sometimes that, there's always space for kindness. And that also, for me at least, leads to the wanting to always help and contribute. And that's the hard work, constantly hardworking, that doesn't always get compensated fairly. So it can be a hindrance sometimes. Do you think that you've ever experienced that? I know I've experienced that for sure. But I don't know if you've ever had, some relation to where your hard work was just it's so ingrained in you that perhaps the compensation or opportunities weren't coming to you, even despite of that consistent hard work.
Oh yeah, I mean there's definitely situations that I've encountered that the hard work doesn't match the compensation. And so that's going to happen. And so that's one of the reasons why my spouse and I are just proponents working for ourselves,
Mhm.
right? And so because then when you're doing your own thing, you're managing your own time, you're setting your own prices, you're working with who you want to work with, then you just kind of are responsible and accountable to yourself. And then you can kind of step. And I see a lot of people who end up doing this, right? Who end up stepping out of corporate America, um, because corporate America can have an idea of what you should be compensated, and it may not jive with your idea of what you should be compensated. So there are lots of options. I believe people can do a lot of contracting work where maybe if you are at a corporate organization that has put you in a box, you know you could be there and do your job well, and do your 9 to 5, and then there are other things that you can do to make additional money for yourself, whether maybe it's a passion project or something that you're good at, maybe some additional consulting, and then maybe that could lead to additional opportunities that your 9 to 5 isn't giving you. So they're exits from the grind. Um, if you feel like you're not getting compensated, there's very methodical things that you can do to get yourself into a situation where you are being properly compensated.
Using that hard work and creating your own opportunities,
Yeah,
basically, is
yeah,
like, it's not
definitely.
happening for you, go find it somewhere. There's a great comedian, Christina Alonso, and she has this bit about El Chapo. I'm just going to use him as an entrepreneur, but I'm not going to talk about all the bad things he did because he's a very bad man. But his ingenuity, ingenuity, can't say that
Hmm.
word.
Yeah.
the way that he would look at problems and be like, oh, you got a border there? Okay, I'm going to create these tunnels and create, these master feats of engineering. Oh, like I can't cross this way. Let me go like build some submarines out of some like scrap metal from the junkyards. Like
Yep.
just finding a way. Well, he could have put that to much better use for the Mexican people. But there's the idea of just that constantly finding a way to do what it is that you want. And if you have an opportunity, you should check out her bit on Netflix because it's hysterical if you haven't seen it.
That's awesome. I will.
Yeah, she's I think from Corpus Christi or somewhere down there. But I want to jump in now to a little break, so we can play a game. And our career paths and the things that we do, it's not from one second you get out of college and you start your career, and then the next second you're at the C level or even a business owner. Our careers and our pay destiny, our success is made up of little things that happen over time. And sometimes these things are not that great, but we need to navigate them and overcome them and find ways to circumvent them in order to get to the goals that we have. And so what we're going to do is play a game of instincts. And this is a workplace instinct, where I'm going to provide you 3 scenarios that you'll have to answer and share with us how you would handle them within 3 minutes. And the way that you win the game and reach your pay destiny is by completing each of the 3 scenarios before the clock runs out. So any questions on the game?
Nope.
Okay, let me set my clock and I'm going to show you that it's actually 3 minutes. Okay, so we've got 3 minutes on the clock.
Okay.
And I'm going to get ready. I will do my very best to not stutter or mess up your time, so that way we can get through these. So I'm going to hit start in 3, 2, 1. You have been with your company for a year and a half and are exceeding every expectation. Someone was just hired with the same job description. You find out they are paid 10% more than you. What do you do?
So I immediately go to human resources and I talk about this new finding and ask them to provide me with more information and details about the job descriptions, their pay bands, and kind of get them to give me information, ammunition about how the company is thinking about compensation, what the process is, asking lots of questions and not talking a lot to have them give me as much info as possible and maybe also help them go through the process as they're answering questions to realize that maybe they don't have a process. It's very equitable, and take it from there.
Got it. Scenario 2. Your boss gets promoted. They are part of the team to decide who will replace them. Your coworker, who is less experienced and often misses deadlines, but frequently spends time socially outside of work with your boss, is invited to apply for the promotion. You are not. What do you do?
I quit. I mean, there's just certain places where the culture does not match your values, and you should not try to move an immovable object. Just stay there, you collect your paycheck, and then you find a new job on their dime.
Scenario 3. You work on a team of all men, and your company is acquired. The new leadership is also all men. Your boss says they need to restructure the department to fit the new management style. This restructuring includes demoting you, but you get to keep your salary because you've been doing a great job. No one else is demoted. What do you do?
Yeah, that's another place where you're going to have a conversation with either your supervisor or human resources. Just ask a lot of questions, not accuse anyone of anything, but just have a lot of conversations, open-ended questions, so that you can hopefully have them through that process understand that maybe something went awry and fix it, before you either decide to leave, um, or make a bigger stink about things.
21 seconds left. Woohoo!
Yay!
Yes,
the
and
the
winner,
second one was
winner.
easy. I said I quit.
I was like, I had to be really, really ching ching cerro la puerta because I was like, I really want to ask you questions right now. So now I'm going to ask you. Um, so let's talk about that. So the scenario was your boss gets promoted. They are part of the team to decide who will replace them. Your coworker is less experienced and often misses deadlines, but frequently spends time outside of work with your boss socially and is invited to apply for the promotion. You are not. What do you do? Your instinct, boom, I quit. So let's talk about that. Like, what does that actually look like? Would you find a job before? Would it be like, Psh, I'm out the door, like right now, like see you later? Like, how would you like? What would that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, whether it's that scenario, whether it's something that's that big, that's that glaring, I think that you always should just be looking for a place that matches your values, right? And so if and when you come across a situation where you realize that your values are not aligned, maybe something hasn't been that egregious. Maybe you just get your 3% bonus and whatever, like, and they just want to kind of slow roll you, and you're not feeling the slow roll. um there isn't a match, right? If you're a person who wants to grow, who wants additional responsibility, and your current organization doesn't want to give it to you, you have to just be methodical about, first, update your resume, detail everything that you've done, go take some really nice professional headshots for your LinkedIn, right? Start connecting with people, start having conversations with people in other companies, and start applying for new positions, right? So that when you walk into human resources with that nice letter of thank you, but I'm out in 2 weeks, you kind of don't have to burn bridges or do anything crazy. Um, because it is good to try to do it as quote unquote classy as possible,
Yeah.
especially if you're going to stay in the same industry. So you just go, you get your new job. When I left my my last position, I like wrote my letter, I emptied out my desk, and I showed up on Monday morning at 8 a.m. and my note was written to HR, and I gave it to them first because if I would have given it to my direct report, then it probably would have not happened, right? They can talk you out of things and
Yeah.
whatever. So it's better just to be like very plain Jane. I didn't know if I was going to get walked out, so my desk was already empty. Um, on Friday I emptied out my desk. Monday morning I came in with my letter of resignation that I handed to human resources, and then I notified my direct supervisor. So just definitely trying to be as chill as possible, so you don't burn as many bridges as possible.
Got it. So that's what I wanted to clarify because it was I quit and I'm like, oh, that can mean so many different things and it happened in so many different ways, you know? So I had to be really good and not to interrupt your game. But that gives me a lot of clarification. I think is really also helpful to people because we do take pride in our work, right? And our emotions are tied to the things that we do and the things that we experience. And there might be moments where it is, I quit, right? You want to say those things like right now in the moment. But it sounds like what you were saying is build out your plan, go find another opportunity, prepare yourself, have that professional exit where they're probably thinking like, oh man, we messed up. Like we
Right.
just lost someone really good. It's not like that person just threw had a Jerry Maguire fit, like
Right.
I quit. Who's
Yeah.
coming
Right.
with
In your mind, you say, okay, I quit, and therefore, what do I need to do to prepare for my next position?
me? Yeah, got
Right.
it.
And so you don't want to do that while you're unemployed, right? You just want to continue doing your job, but you want to start building that bridge.
Got it. Well, thank you for playing that game and sharing your workplace instincts. I know that we're a little over time. Do you still have time?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm
Okay,
fine.
perfect. Um, so now I want to dive into questions about your do's and don'ts. So looking back first at your career, what is the one lesson that you learned that you know now that you wish you knew when you started your career?
Um, I think that there's still an opportunity to be very ambitious, And even though I feel like I have been a go-getter, the world that you think that you're imagining for yourself um, can be, 5, 10 times greater than that. And so, this concept of equity and ownership and, generational wealth was not something that I was thinking about when I was looking for that first position, right? I was just like, I need a job, I need benefits. Oh my God, that's it, right? And so, as you get older, you realize, well, yeah, your salary just kind of, you're paying the bills with that, but you really want to think about ownership, equity. How can I create generational wealth? And so, whatever it is that your paradigm and your schema is, there's an opportunity for it to be bigger than that so that you can have a bigger impact. Um, and so, I definitely wasn't thinking big enough early enough.
Mm, that really resonates with me too. Um, Looking at your experiences as both an employee and an employer, what are your top three do's to move up in your career, get promoted, and increase your pay?
You have to have very clear communication, right? So you always want to make sure that your team members understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, and when you're doing it. Um, you have to make sure that uh, you meet your expectations, and if you can't, you have to communicate. Communication is just so important. And then also you have to definitely be willing to ask for help. That was something that for me was something I had to learn. We come from this academic environment when you graduate from school, and you think like, I can't talk to anyone, I can't see anything because all that's cheating. But the second you start your professional world, it's not like that.
Mhm.
You need to ask for help. You need to look at samples. You need to reach out, have people look at drafts. And I think that was a big paradigm shift for me. That no one was like, "Hey, you're now in this new world. Like, we're all on the same team. We're all here in the same company. Like, you can collaborate with others."
Collaborate. So communicate, ask for help, collaborate. Anything else?
No, I think if you're communicating and you're collaborating, you're going to be winning.
Got it. And then what are your three must not do, don't do this, like stay away from these actions and activities because they will hinder you from reaching your career goals and from getting promotions and getting pay raises. So, what are your three don't do's or
Yeah,
don't?
so you should not lie. You should not steal. You should not cheat, right? So those are like just the basics of, you know, because that's what's going to allow you to make sure that if you are going to move into, different positions, different companies, you maintain a good reputation, right? So when you are collaborating with someone, right, and you finish your finished product, right, you give credit to people, right? Your first slide is presented by, in collaboration with, right? So that way you're not, cheating. When you are given an assignment and you want to collaborate, you can very clearly say, okay, I'm in the marketing department. There's 5 of us here. Is it okay if I share my draft with the 5 members? And your manager might say, well, actually, this is a new top secret development. So make sure you only talk to you and the one other senior person on the team, right? And then that way you can make sure that you kind of keep that corporate IP kind of protected. And then also, if you see things from somewhere else and you want to incorporate it, right, you have to communicate about that as well. Like, hey, I see that this other organization is doing this. Is that something that we could consider doing, or could we take it and modify it? Right? People
Mhm.
do this all the time. But you take something you're inspired by, and then you kind of modify it and make it appropriate for your community. Um, so the pillars of being a good human, right? Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal.
Right. Yeah. And you think they would be kind of basic, but unfortunately, there is within this corporate culture, it's like, I'm going to do what I need to do to climb the ranks and to get noticed. But what that actually becomes something people do notice, and there is a reputation that becomes developed, and to any industry becomes a very small, no matter how big it is. Someone always knows
Totally.
someone, especially with LinkedIn. If I'm doing a reference check, there's certain questions you can ask, but there's 1,000 questions I can ask to understand this person's ethos, their working philosophies, all of that. Hearing like what you're describing too, what I'm also hearing in between the lines is trust.
Yeah.
Is let it be known that you are someone who is trustworthy, because you are someone of your word. You're going to give credit when credit is due. Your coworkers can count on you to, be that open, transparent collaborator. And then also when things need to be very confidential, that you are trusted with that. And for me, that goes very, very, very far. Because when I know someone is trustworthy, that they're solid. They're someone that can be counted on. They're reliable, and also someone who is trustworthy is also, you can trust them to be honest in their communication. So if they are not in agreement with something and they think that there is another better way to do something, or they're seeing something that isn't particularly the right way, something's going on that you should be aware of, they're going to tell you that and be honest and trustworthy in their communication. So those are a couple things I picked up in reading in between the lines, or hearing in between the lines of what you're saying.
Yeah, no, 100%. Totally.
But I want to make sure people listening to this episode today know how they can get in touch with you. So, what is the best way for people to connect with you after hearing this podcast?
Yeah, you could definitely find me on LinkedIn. If you search for my full name, Liliana, my middle name is Aide, and my last name is Monge. You can also find me on Twitter. It's my last name Monge and then Liliana. So would love to connect with folks there.
Perfect. And we will make sure to have those links available so people can connect very easily. And then, what is something, I know that you guys have a scholarship that you are offering for women in tech. I definitely don't want to skip out on mentioning this. So, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have, I think, the most generous Women in Tech scholarship for anyone looking to join a coding boot camp. Sabio, it's $5,500. So, ladies who
Wow.
want to come to our program, their tuition would be $9,500, and that that can also be deferred. So, when you get your job, you can make payments on the 9,500. So today I just had an awesome lady call me. She's like, Lily, I got my job. I'm starting to work. I'm going to get paid here. So November 1st, I'm going to start my payments. And she's making $80,000, and she had been unemployed for a while. She's super excited. And the scholarship and the payment plan definitely allowed her to take the program and just start an amazing new career. So super excited. Would love to have more ladies join Sabio.
I love that. And so, just to really emphasize that, so Sabio is a coding boot camp where anyone from any background, you don't have to have a tech background, can start to build the foundation to become a software engineer. And people are getting hired at places like Amazon and Google and all those top tier one locations, or I should say companies. And what Liliana is describing is a $5,500 scholarship to anyone who wants to get into that coding boot camp. And you don't have to pay up front. They are putting their money where their mouth is, or money where their mouth is, where they're getting you the skills, the job, and then after you get the job, you can pay and back the tuition fee. So there is no reason, if you are stagnant in your career, or you're thinking about like making the jump but have been afraid because you have to shell out a bunch of money up front, or maybe you don't have the money, This is an amazing, amazing opportunity. Thank you so much for sharing that with the audience, because I think there are a lot of people who want to make that jump into tech, but they just don't have the financial resources, or they're thinking, oh my gosh, I have to go to a 4-year college and get a CS degree and, you know, take a bunch of classes that don't relate to the job I want. So this is an opportunity to get in, to have no financial barriers to starting a new career. And as Liliana just shared, there's a woman who had been unemployed, $80,000 starting salary, and now she's paying back that tuition that helped her get that job. So if you're interested, please take a look at Sabio, and it's sabio.com or Sabio.io.
It's sabio.la because we started in Los Angeles.
There we go. I'm glad I asked. So sabio.la, make sure to check them out. Liliana, I want to say thank you so much for being with us on this episode of the PayDestiny podcast. You were a pleasure to have. Everyone knows how to connect with you. We'll have links to be able to connect. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to hearing many awesome things about PayDestiny.
Yes, very soon, very soon.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That concludes this episode of the PayDestiny podcast with Liliana Monge. To never miss an episode, make sure to subscribe at PayDestiny.com. There, you can also subscribe to any of the channels where you stream your podcast, from Pandora to Amazon, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, you name it, we're there. So head over to PayDestiny.com and subscribe now. The PayDestiny podcast is brought to you by PayDestiny.com. Free and compassionately priced software to build your skills and confidence to get a promotion, get a pay raise, and reach your career goals. Create your account now at PayDestiny.com. See you back here for another episode of the PayDestiny podcast. Until then, be well.